Welcome back to Franco Fridays. Today I've got a seminal piece of film from Jess Franco, and that is Exorcism. I'm going to talk about Exorcism in the various alternate versions today. So this film was made in 1974, shot in Paris, predominantly in Paris. And it's a interesting take on what I would call religious exploitation. Jess Franco plays Paul Vogel, who was a defrocked priest that he's fascinated with women. At the same time, he's simultaneously repulsed by them, and he's a lunatic. He's killing them off. And at the same time, you've got a subplot of a kind of a Satan-worshipping black magic group that meets occasionally and has orgies and things like that. And he gets intertwined with that, and it simply feeds his addiction, resulting in additional murders. It's probably really a watershed moment in his career, I believe, because the fact that he stars in the lead role as the lunatic priest has a lot of implications, both personally and professionally. It makes you wonder, the fact that he's doing this, is he exercising his own personal demons in this role, and how much of this role is a reflection of his own inner demons. Interestingly enough, he wanted this role was so important. He believed it was so important to him. He wrote the script under the alias of David Kuhn, which I think he's used that many other times. He didn't want to leave this up to any of his normal acting tropes. I mean, you would have thought that a guy like Howard Vernon, he would have cast Howard Vernon. But he tried to get Vincent Price to play Paul Vogel. Now, that would have been fascinating, to have Vincent Price playing basically a lunatic rapist murderer, directed by Jess Franco. I'm having a hard time imagining that. The bottom line is Vincent Price didn't do the film, and Franco didn't feel like he was going to leave that up to anyone else but himself to play the role, which has, again, a lot of implications, I think, as a personal statement. The fact that Franco gets out in front of the camera in such, more than just a cameo, but in such a role. The fact that he picked that kind of a role for himself to portray is interesting. Like I say, I think the bottom line, I think, is the fact that he was raised in Spain, and under Spanish law at the time, everyone has to be Catholic, or Christian, rather. And he doesn't, Franco was clear in saying he doesn't buy into any of that crap. I think this was a statement, kind of a thumbing of the nose to religion in general and Christianity, those type of things. So maybe that's what he was trying to portray in this. And the other interesting aspect of this is you're combining Christian elements with sadomasochism, really. And he's doing it in such an artsy way that it makes it even more uncomfortable for the viewer. You've got rape and torture scenes that, that are juxtaposed with some extremely good music. As in many of Jess Franco's films, you've got some fantastic music, and this music really is written in such a way that it fleshes perfectly with the film, because he's using like a church organ and a Spanish guitar. So in these scenes of depravity, if you will, I mean, you also got some very beautiful orchestral and religious sounding music to go with it. So he's really taking a big swing for the fences, combining those two elements. And I think it's also talking, and by doing that, you really, is he making a statement about um, the basically the church and religious censorship um, and restrictions on self as opposed to uh, the free spirit alternative. And what happens to people that are under religious restriction? You know, obviously there's all kinds of stories about and evidence to show that people that are raised under heavily religious restrictive uh, restrictions that end up being, you know, deviants in some cases. So that to me is the commonality that I got out of this film. Other interesting aspects of this, which I didn't know, a girl named Carolyn Rivera plays this kind of the go-go dancer in the sadist group's little nightclub. And Franco ultimately meets her and kills her and ties her up to a cross and tortures her and kills her like the others. But the interesting thing about that is the actress that played this is his Franco's stepdaughter. So you've got Franco's stepdaughter in a scene fully nude with Franco basically torturing her and killing her, which you know, that has implications all by itself. I found that fascinating as well. There's a scene there's a lot of graphic scenes in this, but there's an even more graphic X-rated version called Exorcismo. And so what happened was the French producer, wanted Franco to beef this thing up with some graphic violence and nudity. So there's a scene where he disembowels this girl in a bed, which a la Lucio Fulci. And then there's an orgy scene, which is extremely long and tedious, and it was done at the behest of the producers, not Franco. And so this is a great example of, I think sometimes Franco gets criticized for these type of scenes when it's probably not his doing to begin with. He didn't want to do that. He did it at the behest of the producers. And the ironic part of the story is that having done those scenes, and the orgy scene, by the way, is extremely tedious. The only thing that saves it is the music. The film got an X rating. And so what happened was, because the film had an X rating and it couldn't be publicly, you know, it couldn't go through the normal venues to be shown. It was basically going to end up in sex theaters. The producer came back and said, well, you know, Franco, now that we're too soft for the sex theaters, but we've got an X rating, so now we're going to have to beef it up more. So a self-fulfilling prophecy occurs where now you're going to have to create and beef up this movie even more with the scenes that he didn't want to do to begin with. So in this catch-22 situation, there's an X-rated version called Exorcismo, which Franco apparently was involved in and directed. I have not seen it. But you get the idea. I think people on the surface would say, well, you know, he's just into all this kind of perverted kind of crap and pornography and that type of thing, when the reality is he kind of got drugged down that rabbit hole and had to do it anyway. I mean, it wasn't really necessarily his fault. It was the producer's fault. So there is an alternative version that has actually Franco nude in the I haven't seen it, so I can't attest to it. I've read about it with in Stephen Thrower's book on Franco. I read about this, but haven't seen it. There's actually all these different versions. So there's Exorcismo, which is the X-rated version, which has like 20 minutes of inserted hardcore scenes. Then you've got the main film, which is Exorcism, which was in 1974. That's about 95 minutes. Then you've got a version that they made, which is like 70-some minutes, called Demonic. And that's on this release. This is a Kino Redemption release. Demonic was released in a much shortened version, 70 minutes, which again, this is so the producers, I think, have caused this as much as Franco did. The main film, which probably would have been fine had they not gone overboard with the gore and the orgy scenes. Now you've got all these alternate versions because of the rating restrictions. So they knew that they weren't going to be able to release this in America and Europe. So they ended up releasing a really dumbed down version called Demonic, 70 minutes. So the bottom line is, I think the definitive version ended up being the film I'm going to talk about next, which is The Sadist of Notre Dame. So what happened here? Well, again, this material, I think, resonated so with Franco, was so important to him, and he realized that all these different versions were not the original intent, that he ultimately came back in 1979, I believe, and made and reshot scenes and made this film, which is essentially the closest thing to what Jess Franco intended. So he took Exorcism and essentially elaborated in this film on the priest and his backstory, his motivations. So this film is got a bunch of edits in it that are very choppy, but it also illustrates the story and fully fleshes out the priest backstory. And I think it's the closest thing, as Franco indicated, to what he originally intended. I found this film very choppy, though. I mean, obviously, you're taking a movie from 5 years prior and tossing in brand new scenes. You're gonna have some struggles with that. But it is a much less gory. Certainly, he's exorcised a lot of the gratuitous nudity and gore out of the film, and what you have here is a straight up. I think this is more like a straight up slasher film. And I got to tell you, Franco. Not a lot of people don't talk about this when you talk about Franco. This whole project must have had an important resonance with him. A, because he took on the starring role. And B, the starring role is a priest that's a killer, a slasher killer. The fact that he would do that at that point with this type of material, again, has tremendous implications and about him, both personally and professionally. But I can't help thinking that he is trying to go beyond just making a statement about religious restrictions and Christianity and the Spanish dictatorship. It was more than just thumbing of the nose. I think it was a personal. There's obviously got to be some personal demons he's exercising with these films. This film goes into a lot of detail about his backdrop story with the priests. In fact, there's a lot of scenes with, I guess, fellow priests that realize that he has a problem in the film, and in some cases are trying to protect him, but he's wearing out his welcome with, obviously, the church and its structure is only going to put up with so much, So the film does a good job of portraying those elements. So I thought it was a very interesting film, and the variations of the film, of all the variations of the film, I still like Exorcism the best. Only because this one had technical issues. I mean, it's clearly got some serious technical issues. It jumps around a lot, and the editing is really, really rough. And I don't fault Franco for that. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you're trying to recreate a film from the original 5 years later. So, you got to cut him some slack on that. So I think this is the closest to what he intended, but this Exorcism is the better film. So, one other thing as I leave you with those thoughts, there's in 2014, there was a 4-disc ultimate set released on all these films at a website, SpanishFilms.com or something like that. I think it was limited to like 200 copies, which I think has all the different versions that you could possibly get, plus commentary. So if you're interested in getting the whole picture of that project and all the various variants of the film, then that may be the best way to go. Otherwise, I guess I would recommend just picking up the Kino Redemption release and sticking to that. So there you go. That was a complicated Franco Fridays, but I didn't mind tackling it because I enjoyed Jess Franco, and if it wasn't complicated and it was very straightforward and simple, it wouldn't be fun to talk about. So there you go. Thanks for watching.